The wind howled across the lonely plains as the evening sun disappeared behind the hills. Ethan, a struggling rancher, leaned against the barn door, his worn hat pulled low to hide the exhaustion in his eyes. The drought had taken nearly everything from him, his crops, his cattle, and even his will to hope. He hadn't smiled in months, and the ranch felt emptier with every passing day. A faint knock startled him. He wasn't expecting anyone, no one ever came this far anymore. When he opened the door, a thin young woman stood there, trembling under a threadbare shawl. Her cheeks were pale, lips trembling, and eyes filled with quiet desperation. "Can I clean your barn for a plate of food?" she whispered. Ethan froze. The words hit something deep inside him. She wasn't begging, she was offering. The honesty in her tone caught him off guard. He stepped aside and motioned her in without a word. The barn wasn't much shelter, but it was warm compared to the icy wind outside. As she stepped in, he noticed her hands, blistered and raw. Her dress was torn, shoes worn down to the sole. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. Ethan cleared his throat awkwardly. "You don't have to clean tonight. Sit down. I'll bring something." When he returned with a plate of stew and a chunk of bread, she stared at it as if it were gold. "Thank you," she said softly, tears forming in her eyes. She ate slowly, carefully, as if afraid it might vanish if she rushed. Ethan watched her silently, wondering what storm had brought her to his door. After a long silence, she spoke. "My name's Clara. My father died last winter. I tried to work for people in town, but they didn't want someone like me." Her voice broke slightly. Ethan didn't ask what she meant. He knew small towns could be cruel. "You can stay in the loft tonight," he finally said. "The barn's warmer than it looks." She looked up in disbelief, as if kindness was something she hadn't seen in a long time. "Thank you," she whispered again. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The image of Clara curled up in his barn haunted him. There was something about her, fragile but strong, broken yet unbending. He realized he hadn't cared about anyone in a long time, and that scared him more than the loneliness itself. In the morning, he found her already working, sweeping the floor, stacking hay, scrubbing the troughs. "You don't have to do all that," he said. She smiled faintly. "You gave me food. I should give something back." Days passed, and she kept returning. She helped repair fences, fed the horses, and even nursed a weak calf back to health. The ranch slowly began to feel alive again, as if her presence breathed life into it. Ethan found himself looking forward to her soft humming as she worked. One evening, a sudden storm rolled in, fierce and wild. The wind howled, rain slashed through the open fields. Ethan rushed to the barn, worried about the animals, and her. He found her struggling to keep the stable doors shut. Without thinking, he ran to help, their hands brushing as they pushed the doors closed together. For a moment, lightning flashed, and their eyes met, both startled by the unspoken warmth between them. When the storm passed, the barn was quiet except for their breaths. "You should be inside," Ethan murmured. "So should you," she replied softly. They both laughed, a sound that felt foreign and healing. That night, he gave her an old quilt and set up a cot in the corner of the house. "It's safer here," he said simply. She hesitated, unsure if she should accept. "I don't want to cause trouble." He shook his head. "You won't." Over the next few weeks, something changed. The ranch began to recover, small miracles happening one after another. Rain fell, a new calf was born, and the air felt lighter. But, inside Ethan, something deeper was shifting. He realized he was beginning to feel again, hope, care, maybe even love. One morning, he found her sitting by the window, stitching one of his torn shirts. The sunlight caught in her hair, and for the first time in years, he smiled without effort. "You don't have to do that," he said. She looked up and replied gently, "I want to." He almost told her then, how much her presence meant, how she'd saved him from a loneliness he'd accepted as fate. But before he could, a rider appeared on the road, a man from town, grim-faced and carrying a letter. Ethan's heart sank as the man said, "This is for the girl." Clara froze as she took the letter, her face draining of color. Her hands shook as she read, tears falling onto the paper. Ethan stepped closer, alarmed. "Clara, what is it?" She looked up, her voice barely a whisper. "They found my brother. He's alive, but he's in trouble." Ethan's chest tightened. He could see fear in her eyes, the same fear he'd seen the first night she arrived. And he knew then that everything was about to change. Ethan didn't ask questions that night. He simply nodded, his jaw tightening as he watched Clara fold the letter with trembling fingers. "Where is he?" he asked quietly. "They're keeping him in the town jail," she said, her voice breaking. "They think he stole from Mr. Harlan's store. But he didn't, he'd never steal." Ethan grabbed his coat without hesitation. "Then we're going to clear his name." Clara looked up in shock. "You'd do that for me?" He met her gaze firmly. "You've done more for me than you know." Those words made something flicker behind her tear-filled eyes, trust. The kind she hadn't dared to feel in years. They rode into town the next morning under gray skies. The air was thick with whispers when they arrived, people staring at Clara as if she carried shame instead of strength. Ethan ignored them, heading straight to the sheriff's office. The sheriff, a stout man with a mustache that hid most of his mouth, looked up lazily. "You hear about the boy?" Ethan nodded. "He's innocent. You know that as well as I do." The sheriff chuckled. "That ain't for me to decide. Harlan says he saw him near his store." Clara stepped forward. "Please, sir. My brother was looking for work, not trouble. There has to be some mistake." Her voice trembled but didn't break. Ethan's fists clenched, he could see how much courage it took her just to speak. Outside, Ethan took her aside. "If Harlan's behind this, I'll make him tell the truth." But when they reached the store, the old merchant smirked coldly. "That boy's got your eyes, miss. I should have known trouble runs in the family." Ethan's patience snapped. "You've got no proof, Harlan. You just don't like seeing decent folks struggle." The confrontation drew a crowd. Harlan puffed his chest. "If you're so sure, go check the west barn. You'll find what your friend's brother took." His tone was taunting. Clara's eyes widened in fear. Ethan realized instantly, it was a setup. Someone had planted the stolen goods. That night, under cover of darkness, they went to the barn Harlan mentioned. Inside, half buried under hay, they found a small crate labeled with Harlan's own initials. "He hid his own supplies here," Clara whispered, shocked. Ethan nodded grimly. "He wanted your brother blamed." At dawn, Ethan rode back into town, dragging the crate behind him. People gathered again as he threw it at the sheriff's feet. "Here's your thief," Ethan said. "And here's the proof of who set him up." The sheriff's eyes widened as he saw the initials burned into the wood. Harlan tried to speak, but the crowd turned on him, angry at the lie. By afternoon, Clara's brother was free. He was young, frail, and looked at Ethan with disbelief. "You helped her." Ethan smiled faintly. "She helped me first." Clara hugged her brother tightly, tears of relief streaming down her face. Ethan turned away, giving them their moment, his heart unexpectedly full. Days later, the siblings prepared to leave. "We'll head east," Clara said softly. "Start fresh. You've already done more than we can repay." Ethan's chest ached at the thought of her leaving. He forced a nod. "You deserve peace." But as they rode off, a hollow quiet settled over him again, the kind he thought he'd escaped. Weeks passed. The ranch felt lifeless once more. Her laughter no longer echoed across the fields, and the evenings stretched endlessly. He tried to bury himself in work, but every corner of the ranch reminded him of her hands fixing the fence, her soft voice singing to the horses. Then one crisp morning, as the first snow fell, Ethan heard a knock. He opened the door, and there she stood, Clara, smiling through tears. "He's safe," she said, her voice trembling. "He found work in the city. But I couldn't stay away." For a long moment, Ethan couldn't speak. The air between them buzzed with everything they hadn't said. "You sure about that?" he finally managed, his voice rough. She nodded, stepping closer. "You once gave me food when I had nothing. But you also gave me hope. I want to give that back, to you." He reached out, taking her hand slowly, afraid she might vanish like a dream. "Then stay," he whispered. "Not because you owe me anything, but because this ranch isn't home without you." Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded. "Then I'm home." Spring returned sooner than expected that year. The land seemed greener, the cattle healthier, the air lighter. Together they worked the fields, rebuilt fences, and mended each other's broken pieces. Neighbors who once whispered now smiled when they passed. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Ethan would find her sitting on the porch, humming softly as the sun dipped below the horizon. He'd join her, wordless but content, knowing that the emptiness that once haunted his days was gone for good. And whenever someone new came to the ranch asking for work, Clara would smile kindly and say, "There's always room for one more here. Just ask for a plate of food first." Ethan would chuckle at that, because he knew that one simple request had changed both their lives forever.